So I've been thinking about the three contiguous states again as presenting an analogy to the international borders and the international engagement that happens in the North American continent. And the more I consider American businesses and American engagement, and I'm saying North American, and of course there are bodies of land that are associated with North America as well, but I'm focusing on the three at the moment because of the fact that the World Cup is coming to these lands. Now, the media has presented the borders, I don't know if it's accurately or not, but the borders as a very sort of strife place. Um, this is a development that I heard in the 90s and earlier, but once I went through Canada in 2005, it was smooth sailing. So I don't know if that was just the propaganda bringing itself to my consciousness, but they turned it into something different more recently when I attempted to go in 2025. So I'm a little concerned about the businesses of the U.S. and I'm wondering what's happening in Canada and in Mexico. One of the brands that I know of Canada, especially, is coming from I believe I can't remember what his ethnic, I think he's Iranian man who owns a chocolate company there. But I think we also have the Greenies, which Buddy is a big fan of. Mexico is, I always find it interesting to see some of the things that Mexico does as presented to me. Some of those things that I have seen is through the brands, stereotypically or typically presented imagery of other nations around the world are presented as coming from a Mexican brand. So instead of giving credit to the nation as like this is what they are coming from a Mexican brand. So for example, I saw an interesting pasta or an interesting pasta sauce that's a sort of marinara that's typically presented to the global consciousness as Italian. So it's very possible that there's a sort of absorption of that. But I think to do that is, Mexico and other nations had to be super cautious about it, even if they have aspirations to have the Food and Agricultural Organization more centered on their cuisines or anything of that nature. I don't think it's a good idea to present Mexico as the one to which uh, they do that. Now, there's a question of authenticity, whether it's actually a Mexican brand or just that which is being presented to us as a brand that's Mexican. Um, I caution our nation against that, or even the North American community against that, because if we're working towards having a World Cup, and we're going to be inviting all these people from all over the world that are going to look at our property, look at our lands, invest in our businesses, invest in our peoples, absorb our cultures, see our cultures, really encounter them, take pictures, and really get a sense of who we are. I don't want it to be that Mexico gets the Italians all in a tizzy because they're aspiring for the food and agriculture. Maybe as, funded by Spain or whatever else. But I'm hoping that Spain, if they do see the Mexicans do that, help encourage them to even sort of go in another direction. I know sometimes we speak the language of our enemies because that's what we absorb through whatever war engagements that we have, but I do think there's a sufficient influence coming from Europe on their cultures, on the cultures of a Spanish-speaking world. The Canada is an interesting nut to crack too because um they're quote unquote permanent nations that have had an interesting influence on their culture. They have both France and England sort of really presenting a lot of sort of tendrils into the modern or native cultures throughout the nation, which have had their own sort of commissions and truth commissions that they've dealt with throughout its history. I'm not sure if Canada is equipped or ready um, for it, but they do seem to understand how to have multiple masters, I guess is what I'm wondering. Even though they have a nexus directly to the Commonwealth and they're directly associated with the UK. So they are, I think, might be a good nation to look to understand how to negotiate that with the international community. We do it ourselves. We do a very good job in the United States and with diplomacy, I think. I mean, I'm a little incredulous, especially since when I did reach out for express acknowledgement as a native-born American, that there was a real, sort of aggression inflicted on me. So I don't know if that's just me or widespread. I'm not certain. I'm certainly not trying to subvert the process, but I did see that it was difficult for folks that were really from the U.S. to do things, and it's sort of, I think, embodied in some part by what the Republican narrative is presenting to the national stage, with you know sort of international community really sort of fueling and funding their efforts. So that's that. Still working towards that threefold analysis of the three states. I have California, Oregon, and Washington. Certainly coming into California from Oregon was definitely atrocious, but I don't know if it's because people were nervous that California would observe some of the things that have happened, as they are a very large state with a domination of the region as well as the nation, in sort of rural plurality or rural duality with other states in particular, as presented earlier in my thought processes, with Texas and Florida and New York being major states. If you think regionally, though, I think the three seem relatively, collaborative, but I imagine that the log jam that I encountered with the major snowstorm entering California may well have either A, been presented for me to see it in a certain way, or B, to show that there's a lot more sort of discord that meets the eye between the two internal borders of the U.S. So I don't know if that was just to be presented to me because of my positing of the question. I mean, I never crossed the border between Oregon and California before I started questioning whether we should have an express constitution and not just a treaty that's centered on the the three nations in North America, the trade systems that they had. And there's a lot of parallels to the European Union, which I'm an expert in because of studies that I did in the 90s concerning the EU and the EU engagement with their process of becoming a supranational government. I studied how the currency changed. I immersed myself in how the nations started developing on that stage. So I'm ably situated to help my nation do so, if it does arise. And I certainly don't think that the Europeans are discouraging it, because I think if you see, and I don't know if expressly so, but if you see the Russian example, passing the baton is perhaps in part what could be happening with the international community expressing or encouraging us to do so. So, I mean, I'm certainly ably situated and hoping that those that may consider such a question presented on the world stage allow me to manage a conference of sorts, but they keep getting in the way of the people that can have the discussions with me because they want to kick the ball around the court and drink some beer and do keg stands with a bunch of folks while they do commercial activity. And, I get it. I get it. You want to be the one who does it, and I support that. I want you to be as well. But I hope you're understanding that you're not seeing my expertise is a little questionable. I'm not trying to make it about me again, but I'm just considering that moment crossing into Oregon, into Washington, into California. Washington was smooth sailing pretty much, but going into California was not. So, and again, I had never did it before my constitutional moment assertion, so I can't affirmatively state that it wasn't because of someone trying to present a question to me based on the question that I asserted when I was in Olympia about the 3 contiguous states in the Pacific coast, serving as an analogy for the 3 states and contiguous states, or 3 states in the contiguous North American region. So we'll see how it goes. And, I think not trying to take away from anyone else's management skills, but I'd be happy to manage a deliberation on it. But I would probably decline if they end up doing what they just did with the singing. And it's not that I don't want to infuse it. I think it would be an insult if there wasn't sort of management or leadership capacity imparted to me, rather than, let me teach you how to sing again. When, I'm not trying to take away from that. But I will be hard-pressed to just do it that way. I'd be happy to defer to the funding and the funders that would provide the leadership capacity, but they have to trust me to do that. So, we're here now. That's the point. Whether we get there or not is a question, and I hope those in the world stage, if they do decide to conquer the North American continent and displace all the people and enslave all of us, that they understand that I'd be happy to present myself to you as a way that protects against you from harming them too much. There's a lot of good here. There's a lot of good here.